and you could sue them.
Yeah, not yet. But
I wouldn't recommend it, but
no, yeah. Startup takes on the Fed.
Hello, pirates. Welcome back. My name is Lucas Finko.
And I'm Ravi Mikkelsen.
And today, this week of April 15th, we are the Pirates of Clean Tech.
Arr.
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 Yeah.
Love it.
That's awesome, Ravi. Thanks for coming on the show, Ravi. We're excited to have you. You're co-founder of an interesting new startup in the clean finance space called Atmos. So I'm wondering if you could start out talking about Atmos. What is it, and what do you do?
Sure thing. Full name is Atmos Financial because there are many companies named Atmos, including a Dolby speaker set. So if you just search for Atmos, we're not big enough yet to come up there. So you need to search for Atmos Financial. And as you mentioned, so we are a banking startup to democratize climate action and to be wholly focused on funding the clean energy transition, an equitable clean energy transition. Because to date, the banks haven't really put their might, our deposits to use in funding this transition. And this is the cheapest capital essentially on the planet. And it needs to be brought to bear on this issue. So that's what we're looking to do. And we just crossed 3 months in market a couple of days ago.
Oh, cool. So we're always looking for ways that individuals can actually do something about climate change. So is this something I can get involved in?
Yes, and it's one of the reasons why we did it and why we use the word democratize climate action, because so many people think, well, I'm not a material scientist. I'm not going to come up with a new solar panel
Right.
or I don't install wind turbines. What can I do? And it's like, well, do you have a bank account? It's like, yes, I do. Well, if you move your money out of Chase or Wells Fargo or Bank of America or a city, the top 4 largest banks in America, which also happen to be the 4 largest funders of fossil fuel extraction in the world, that will help. If you live in an apartment and your roof is your upstairs neighbor's floor that you can't put solar panels on, like, again, you can move your money and we can use that money to fund solar on somebody else's roof, perhaps on the roof of your own building. So this is something that everyone who has a bank account can do. And we launched with a savings account, which pays 10x the national average. So it's not like you're suffering or have to sacrifice to switch your money. In fact, you don't even have to switch. It's not like you have to close down your existing account. You can come to Atmos, open a new account with us, move over some of your money, and every dollar that gets deposited, we're going to make use of to fund right now clean energy. First, it's going through partner banks to finance utility scale solar. And then this summer, we're actually going to start our own lending program, and that will be for residential solar. And so our goal there is to make it more affordable and accessible for all Americans. Because right now, it's really limited to higher income and higher credit score homeowners.
Right. Okay, so interesting. So I can open a savings account at Atmos, what is it, joinatmos.com, and then you'll use the deposits from customers to fund clean energy projects, right?
Yes. And
awesome.
How we fund them is another question we get is, well, if I invest into a solar project directly, I can earn 5 or 8% and you're paying 0.5%. Why would I do that? Is that if you invest directly into a solar project, you can't take that money and go and buy milk with it. Ours, we offer FDIC insured, fully liquid bank accounts. So it's really store your money with us when you don't need it or as you wish it to grow in the savings account. And we'll be able to leverage it still, but it's still 100% yours. You have full access to it.
Right. Okay. Well, just like a normal bank, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Except 3 minutes to sign up, connect to an external account, your Chase, Wells Fargo, etc. move over some money, and while it sits with us, we help to stop climate change.
Oh, cool. Cool. 3 minutes. Very interesting. So a lot of our listeners, want to get involved in clean tech and clean finance, but they don't know how. So I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about how you got here. Like, what was your kind of career evolution to become a co-founder?
Yeah. And for me, like I've been on this, I've been in climate and clean energy for 21 years come this August. So this has really been, it is my life's mission. And I had a moment of epiphany at university orientation, uh, where this woman was talking about this research program, and she said, "Oh, you right away you'll do graduate level research into water quality testing or eco-friendly materials or renewable energy or something, something, something." Because when she said renewable energy, I couldn't hear anything else. Like the room got dark. There was a spotlight on her. There was heat in my chest. And then this booming voice in my head that said, "This is your mission in life. It's to help the world transition off of fossil fuels." And so pretty much since that day, I have been looking for, what I call my Archimedes lever. Archimedes,
Mhm.
one of the first tools we learn about in engineering. Archimedes famously says, give me a lever long enough and
Right,
firm ground to stand upon, and I can move the world.
right.
And so it's like, how can I move the world on to move off of fossil fuels? And first, as an engineer, as a budding engineer, I said, "Oh, I will develop the new solar cell. I will develop hydrogen fuel cells. I will develop this energy generation technology." And had some interesting, scientific success with some of the different products, but market timing, different things, never really like blossomed into a big commercial success. And then about 5, 6 years ago, came to the conclusion that it was capital deployment that was my Archimedes lever. Like this
Hmm.
is um, you know, the old saying, money makes the world go round. And it was really one of the main things that brought the cost of solar down by 90% over this last decade was the business model innovations of the no money down lease, PPA, and other financing innovation that allowed us to deploy so much. And with each doubling, we're seeing roughly a 20 to 36% cost decrease in installation, depending on sort of what component or the overall system you're looking at. So I was like, okay, I want to do this. And also at the same time, I want to help other entrepreneurs, other technologies get to market faster. So I've been running a network out here in San Francisco called Climate Link.
Hmm.
Uh, we hold events to showcase new startups. We make connections between startups and appropriate sources of capital, because it's not always a venture investor. Sometimes it's a philanthropist or a government agency to match the stage and market for that technology and entrepreneur. Um, and sort of specifically how Atmos got started. So as I was working to deploy capital and developed through Department of Energy program this loan model to bring um, to move residential solar from a random knock at your door, as has been done, like into the mortgage purchase event. So let's put solar directly into the mortgage, brings down the cost. Psychologically, it overcomes the barrier of spending nothing on your energy, to now all of a sudden you're borrowing $500,000 or more, and now we're going to bump it up by $30,000. Um, so that's sort of like how it came to be. And then, you know, there was a downturn in the market that put that idea on the shelf. But then when the IPCC, so now we're talking October 2018, the IPCC comes out with this report, their special report on 1.5 degrees. They say, we need to spend trillions of dollars every year on this transition if we're going to have a greater than 50-50 shot on staying below, this temperature rise. And I was like, okay, well, who's got that much money? Because I don't. It's like, well, the US government does, the Chinese government, the EU. and then the banks. Like they're the ones that have this much money to deploy on a regular basis. It's like,
Right.
okay, can't start a country and tax enough people, but can I start a bank? I was like, well, I don't know how to start a bank. I've never done that. Let's see if somebody else doing this. No. Okay, I'm going to start a bank. So as I'm thinking about this, I go to this, it's like, I'm going to start a bank. Next question, how do you start a bank? Like, do what any good engineer would do, go to the source and read the technical documentation. And so I went to the OCC, the Office of the Comptroller of Currency, part of the Department of Treasury.
Yeah.
And they basically have the Cliff Notes version, which is about 600 pages or so of like how to start a bank. So I read that plus a few others. And I was like, okay, I've got a good idea. And it's going to require a ton of money, like more money than most startups raise. And also they want bankers to start banks. They don't want random engineers and entrepreneurs to start banks, which makes sense. So as I'm thinking about this, and it's like, how do you do it from like a fintech perspective? I'm at an event on regenerative agriculture, and this man comes in and sits down next to me. Turns out the seat next to me was the last one available, and he was late. And so, at the break, we're introducing ourselves, and he happens to be a banker. So Pete Helwig, who's my co-founder, he was at the time, he worked for New Resource Bank, which was bought by Amalgamated Bank. New Resource Bank was like the sustainability bank in America. Amalgamated Bank is a social and labor union focused bank. It was started out of a labor union in New York. So Amalgamated bought New Resource Bank to sort of bring sustainability like into their brand. They wanted to start getting into financing renewable energy and such. It didn't happen sort of as quickly as Pete wanted to see. So he was in the process of transitioning out of that bank. I was like, I'm trying to start a bank. And he's like, hey, I'm at a bank, leaving this bank. And I've been thinking about how do I start a bank? If Patagonia were to start a bank, what would that bank look like? So that's where like he was coming from. And so in terms of like, how did we become co-founders? Literally, it was the only seat left in the auditorium was that it came to be. And it just happened that he was in the process of leaving his company and I was getting things going with this. So we talked for a bit, and then he joined me full time. And it just sort of decent idea. Now I've got somebody who's worked at a bank joining me. Now the investor's like, okay, it sounds like this might work, but we're still not sure yet. And then we got to present at a conference. There was a man in the audience who's like, oh, this is a good idea. And I'm like, thanks, random person. He's like, yeah, we think so too. Turns out he ran one of the top 20 banks in the world. So he actually knew what he was talking about. So Andrew Thorburn, so he took a liking to us, and he's Australian. And we flew to Australia in January of 2020, right at the height of their fire season, to meet with him. And he decided to come on board as our board chair and first investor. And thankfully he did, because that was right before the start of the COVID pandemic. And so if we hadn't gone down at that moment, this probably wouldn't have happened. Like Atmos would not be here. So it's a lot of these moments have lined up, and it's like we sort of captured on these moments of opportunity. And so it's sometimes it's, you can call it luck, but it's also it's good fortune in that we were open to these opportunities and we seized upon them. So if there's somebody who's watching this who's like, I'd like to start something, open yourself up to the possibility. Become comfortable with discomfort, because most likely you're not going to get paid for a while. You have to like be comfortable with that and be comfortable with rejection. I probably have a list of over 200 investors who said no, like for this one project, going back the 20 years of
Yeah.
trying different things, it's probably been told no 1,000 times if I
Yeah.
add them all up. There's so many ways to work in this space. And so I'd say there's the process of ikigai. Have you heard this term?
No.
So it's a Japanese term for basically what you should be doing. Um, so it's like, what does the world need? What are you good at? What can you be paid for? Um, it's like, what gives you joy? And then I think there's one other thing. It's sort of this Venn
Mm.
diagram of these 5 different circles. Um, and then um, I know Dr. Ayana Elizabeth Johnson, one of the founders of the All We Can Save project and ocean scientist there in New York City, she explains it a little bit more simply with 3 circles. And basically, what you love, what you're good at, and what the world needs.
Mm.
And sort of at the center of that is what you should be doing, because there's so much that we can do, and climate change touches on everything. So if you're a good communicator and you like to host parties, well, you can bring people together. One of the most important things we can do is talk about climate change. So bring
Mm.
people together and talk about how climate change is affecting your circle. You can do this. If you're a lawyer, you can work on various legal actions to defend the planet. We'll be talking about a legal action in our news articles at the end.
Yeah.
So there's so many different ways to get involved, and it doesn't require you to be a scientist or even an entrepreneur. You can do things within your own company. You can do things as a
Right.
teacher, as a parent, as a student, as a child. There are things that we can all do.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's great. Those are some great stories, especially about entrepreneurship and about how, yeah, sometimes you just have to stick your neck out, keep trying, keep talking to people, right, and keep pushing until something lands. So that's really valuable
Yeah. How
advice
did
for our
you get
listeners.
into this, Lucas? I haven't, like, on all the episodes I've listened to, don't think I've heard your origin story.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's a really good point. I did work for a utility for many years on clean energy, and I was a manager of analytics for a major utility, and so I was involved in a lot of uh, clean energy analysis and forecasting and planning and working with the regulators and working with the engineers. And so I got kind of it's kind of an insular world. So not a lot of people know how utilities work unless you've worked for a utility,
Mhm.
right? Because it's kind of sealed off to the outside. There's very few other people that know besides like utility policy lawyers. So when you try and go make changes to the utility, I think a lot of people get confused and don't know what's going on because nobody outside the utility knows what's going on in there.
Right.
Um, and so that's kind of why I'm trying to get more active. I teach a class on energy analytics and I have this podcast now, just trying to get people up to speed and kind of explain why things happen the way they do at the utility, and how we can work with that and how we can work together with them and help this energy transition along. I think they're going to have to be very important, so we can't just ignore them. We can't try and get rid of them. You can say, oh, Elon Musk's going to make them irrelevant, but that's not really true, right? You still
Yeah.
have to plug into the grid. So net metering is going to be a huge issue, and we need to understand why and how it works and what the issues are. So, yeah, that's kind of my background and why I'm in this.
Yeah. Great. Well, thank you.
Yeah. Um, so I just have one last question. So that was great, about your career and your background. I was wondering, we talk a lot about price on the show and the price of solar and the price of storage and impacts on markets we talk a lot about. And so I'm wondering, like, there's already a lot of kind of financial incentives out there for clean energy, right? Like solar incentives and storage incentives, and then you have tax credits, and you have incentive programs, and you have green banks. And we're starting to get to a point where clean energy is cheaper, like at least maybe wind and solar is cheaper. Storage, we're still working there. So how does your kind of bank fit into this giant mess of financial incentives and other processes?
Yeah, I mean, so for us, we'll be, especially to start, we'll be sort of on the consumer residential side of deploying capital. And so if you live in a single family home and you've got a roof and you want to put solar on it and you want to get the fossil gas appliances out and switch for electric and induction stove and heat pumps and so forth, uh, we will offer you a loan, a better price, and we'll show you what the financial outcome and environmental outcome of that will be. And we will show you some of the different incentives that you get access to,
Okay.
maybe even help you there. And I think, for us, we want to make it, we want everyone to be able to participate. So how do we expand access? So one critique of the clean energy transition to date has been that the benefits have concentrated to the wealthy. The tax credits, the greater your tax liability, the greater credit you have access to. And so low income, low income homeowners, they won't have the same level of liability, so they don't get the same level of support for their solar system. And so I think both us as an entity and as an industry, I think we can also lobby for changes to how we offer incentives. And there's talk now of changing like the ITC, the investment tax credit, on this towards a straight cash distribution, so that it would be more equal, and those without the tax liability would also be able to participate and see these benefits. And I think also, as a financial entity, as a banking entity, we can help hold people's money and just say, hey, this is also benefiting this transition.
Sure.
So yeah, there's a lot of different ways, and we're still figuring out. We're still pretty new, but our primary path will be deployment of capital.
Very cool. Yeah, we definitely need it, and we'll talk a little bit more about capital being deployed in a little bit when we get to our articles. Thanks so much, Ravi. Where can we find Atmos again? How do we find you?
Yeah, if you would like to join us on this journey, you can go to joinatmos.com, and that is ATMOS, like the atmosphere, the protective layer of gases that cover the planet and keep us all alive. Yeah.
Cool.
Well, thanks, Lucas.
Yeah, thanks, Ravi. All right, Ravi, let's move on to some recent news articles that we want to discuss. Do you want to go first? Why don't you go first?
Sure. Since we're talking financing, there was a great article in Bloomberg recently about residential PACE and one of the potential downsides of PACE, or rather how it's been exploited by bad actors. And beautiful idea PACE was when it was created, and the inventor Cisco DeVries in the game, like he's all about inclusion and wanted to help more people go solar, but it's really been taken advantage of to lock people, many on fixed incomes, into these predatory loans and liens on their homes. I haven't been a huge fan of it just because of the added complexity, but in commercials, like it's in 3 states and not in California, Missouri, and Florida. So it's not widespread across the US. And it's not even in every county in those 3 states.
Okay.
But and then in commercial PACE, it's in 22 or 26 states now. And that I think is amazing. I think we should get rid of residential PACE. But we should push more into commercial PACE.
Well, just so people know, what is PACE again?
It is property assessed clean energy. So essentially, it's a tax assessment put onto the property, and often you pay it through your tax bill. So it's sort of sold as this magic fairy dust of no money down, and you don't have to have any income because it's just like, have you been paying your mortgage? And then you qualify for it. In California, they did put into an ability to repay the loan as a stipulation. So that's put in consumer protection. And
Mm,
if Florida and Missouri also put those in, the volume will go down because it will protect more consumers.
right. Okay,
Um,
so I get a loan for solar panels on my roof, and then I don't pay a loan. It goes on my property taxes. I just get a bigger property tax bill, right?
right.
Okay, interesting. And so these, so I can imagine once, once enough people see how this works, you're gonna have some scam artists or some people causing problems, right? And that's what this is about.
Yeah. And it's the need. I mean, it puts a black eye on the entire industry, and people say, "Oh, I don't want to go solar because solar is a scam." Oh, the entire, you know,
Yeah.
paint everyone with the same brush. And really, this this idea was developed 20 years ago when solar was 10x the cost or more of what it is now. And
Mm,
so now it's so you can actually get a unsecured consumer loan for less expensive than you can get a PACE loan.
hmm,
Um, and in a few more years, it's like as we're moving forward, and like you can actually just finance it with your mortgage, then it's even better. Like
right.
um, PACE was a great idea. It's expensive capital. Like that, in addition to sort of the predation by these bad actors, it's just more expensive capital. It is not financially a good deal for most homeowners.
Yeah, I mean, I could see people throwing some huge interest rate on here, and then you're stuck with it. You're locked in, right? Because it's through your property taxes,
Yeah,
and
if
then
you're paying an 8 to 12% loan over 20 years on, and you have maybe like a 2 or 3% mortgage, like
right,
it doesn't make sense.
right. And then if you default on that, it's your property taxes, right? So you can slip
You
into foreclosure and
Yeah, people have lost their homes, and
oh,
like it is, and it's the people who can least afford to do so are the ones who are most at risk.
right. Like this gentleman here,
Yeah, I believe he's he's a retiree, he's a veteran, yeah,
right?
retired postal worker. So he's on a fixed income, and $10,000 added to his annual property tax bill
Yeah,
on a 1,500 square foot home.
that's crazy. Yeah,
And and so people are, it's taking out a $15,000 loan or $10,000 loan and paying $35,000 total. Like it's egregious.
yeah,
And there should be a lot of like hidden arbitration and anti-consumer protection clauses put in there. So it's,
so fix it or get rid of it, right?
yeah, I think, overall we can just get rid of it because it's not needed. It's added complexity at its best. Like, and
Oh,
then it's it's predatory at its worst.
rates 8 to 12%. Oh my God. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. We know all about residential base now. Okay. We'll
Yeah.
move on, right?
Got through it without cursing. This is another really interesting one. So again, sort of sticking with the banks and finance, is Client Earth, this nonprofit. They're suing the European Central Bank (ECB) about essentially. So the central banks will often buy corporate bonds to move things forward in different projects, and they have um, a history of buying these infrastructure bonds for oil and gas companies for fossil fuel. And what Client Earth is saying is that the ECB has a duty um, to protect the citizens of Europe. And by buying these bonds and providing cheap capital for fossil fuel extraction, they're actually breaking, they're actually failing in their duty. And they have one of the questions sort of to the European Supreme Court is like whether or not these are actually like valid or invalid purchases. And so and I think this is going to be the trend. We see similar things here in the US, not sort of on the litigation side just yet, but we see who was it? The commodities it was basically the regulatory body for like the
AFTT.
commodities and exchange.
Yeah.
They said climate change is a direct risk to the financial sector. The Treasury Department now is looking at climate change and the risks of climate. So it's not just going to be pressure from all of us consumers for banks to move and for companies. We're going to start seeing it from the regulatory side as well, that climate risk is financial risk. Larry Fink, CEO of BlackRock, said that exact statement. And now we're going to see the regulators start requiring this. The CFO is going to have to start including this in their financial statements. It's like, if you are measuring risk and not including climate risk, you have an incomplete risk calculation.
Interesting, because the Federal Reserve is also buying corporate bonds now, correct? They buy
I believe so.
like funds. They don't buy them directly, so it'd be
Yeah, I'm
hard
not
for them to.
100% certain, but it wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah. Or are they just buying agency and treasuries? I can't remember. But I wonder if they also have a similar statement, and you could sue them.
Yeah, not yet. But
I wouldn't recommend it, but
no, yeah. Startup takes on the Fed. I think it would be the Environmental Defense Fund or NRDC, the
correct.
National Resource Defense Council, one of them that would do so.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I didn't mean you specifically, but yeah, in general. Yeah. That's interesting. It's good to see. Again, this comes back to what we've been saying, and we're going to say again a couple times here that you can't just come up with a target for 2050 and go back to work like nothing happened. You have to start making changes. And the ironic thing is the Rockefeller Foundation already divested, from carbon investments. So yeah, we have to start doing it. We can't just make a press release. We have to make the changes.
Yeah, and on those divestment claims, those big funds and foundations and endowments, they're like, oh, we're fully divested. Well, from your public equities and perhaps private equity, and even the debt that you hold, but the cash, most of these big funds have 1% to 5% cash in total assets. And they have so much cash, it's not going to be at a local community bank. It's not going to be at a credit union. Right. It's going to be at one of the big banks, and that money is going to be leveraged to fund fossil fuel extraction. So until they move the money out of those big banks, or they can ring fence it so that it isn't used, they're not fully divested.
Well, they should move them into Atmos, right? I mean,
we will take it. I will work day and night to figure out how to make that happen.
There you go. That's a good conundrum.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on. Oh, Canary Media. Look at this. This is our new green tech. Well, sorry, I'm not supposed to say that. Our new clean energy source.
Yeah, I mean, well, you can say that for those who are watching / listening that don't know, Green Tech Media, the news article that was purchased by Wood Mackenzie many years ago, was just shut down by Wood Mackenzie, and many of the editors and writers from Green Tech Media left, and they formed a new not-for-profit media company under the Rocky Mountain Institute, and it's named Canary Media. The canary in the coal mine. They're the ones. Yep. They're sounding the warning, which I absolutely love. And so this amazing writing. And so this piece is actually by a guest writer, Justin Guai, who's a director at the Sunrise Project. It's corporate net zero climate goals, 2030 game changers or 2050 greenwash. What we see out of about 200 very large corporations, 0 of them have actually done meaningful 2021 actions. So when your homework is due 2 weeks out, you do it on day 13. And that's what we're seeing a lot on these net zero targets. Other than so they're not taking action. They're not allocating capital, and that's where you see where the rubber meets the road. Companies like Google, like Microsoft, that are working, especially Google, who's actually working towards. So I think it was in 2017 they reached 100% clean energy consumption on an annual basis. So they use 100 units of energy. They consumed or they purchased 100 units of clean energy. And what they've been doing since then is moving to 24/7 clean energy. So they're matching up electron per electron.
Right.
Um, and so they're a really good sort of corporate actor to emulate. They were the first to sort of the single largest electric vehicle charging station, like in their parking lots, their main campus.
Hmm.
They got solar panels everywhere. Like
Mm-hmm.
when you go into the parking lot, the carports are solar panels,
Mm-hmm.
so you can get a little bit of shade in a lot of spots. That's really good. Here you see a lot of like commitments. You have to be watching this to see, otherwise you just hear me saying this.
Yep.
But there's a chart with 3 different colors of green, orange, red, and it's mostly red, especially on the capital allocation alignment.
Yep.
So they're just not doing it, and so we need to hold them accountable. Whether if you're a shareholder, if you're an employee, we've seen that is effective. Um, the employees at Amazon have really gathered together to push the company on moving on their climate targets and setting and allocating capital. So we do have power if we work together.
We saw something similar in the last episode for utilities. Utilities are in the same boat with this, right? As far as having a medium-term target and having current capital allocation alignment. I mean, this is just the saddest thing I've ever seen. How
Yeah.
can you have an agreement for 2050 or 20, and everybody is installing long-lived assets, every business.
Yeah.
So you can't tell me that you're committed to that target if you're not putting capital there. So yeah, this
Yeah.
is just crazy.
And what I don't get about the utilities is there's smart people that run these, and the writing is on the wall that the transition is happening.
Right.
And you have this guaranteed 8-10% return on your capital deployed, for your installations. You could finance solar on the customers. You send them emails and mailings every single month. Say, hey, let's put solar on your roof. Let's change out that furnace for a heat pump. Let's put a charging station a charger in your garage. It's like, oh, and you know what? We're just gonna do this right on your bill.
Yeah.
You don't have to do nothing. You just sit there. You have a healthier, safer, more performant home, and now you're ready for the future. Wow, that's awesome. And in many cases, it will be a net zero change or slight savings to the customer, huge savings to the to the utility, because now they've just put controllable loads into all of those buildings. And now it's like, oh, you've got generating assets throughout your territory. You have controllable loads throughout your territory. You're like, hey, all of a sudden, 10,000 EVs get plugged in. Let's stagger them out by 20 minutes.
Yeah.
It all stays within there. Like, I just don't understand it.
Well, there's probably about a dozen reasons why that hasn't been done already. Yeah, it's a very difficult space to work in, right? You have regulators, you have unions, you have very conservative company, right? That doesn't like to rock the boat. A lot of these companies have been paying dividends for 40 years. They get a lot of criticisms when the lights go out. There's just so many reasons why, utilities want dispatchable, reliable pipes and wires and generators, and they're not, they don't see a good future for them with a lot of solar panels and not enough storage, and you can't dispatch solar and it's variable, it varies, same with wind. how are they going to manage all that? So yeah, was that a dozen? That was about a dozen. I mean, and then they
Yeah.
go to regulators, and regulators say, is this the lowest cost option for your customers? And I don't know, right? No. The answer's been no. So yeah, a lot of barriers for why that hasn't happened, right? You're not dealing with a company that's kind of in the market like most people think. It's a regulated monopoly, right?
Yeah.
So it's very difficult to get any kind of change. It takes years. Yeah,
Yeah.
very tough, very tough job.
Yeah.
I don't envy the utilities at all.
Yeah. Why don't we jump to the energy one since we're talking about utilities?
Oh, you want to do that? You want to? Yeah. So this is actually my article, right? This is out of the Energy and Policy Institute. Records reveal Entergy's role in stalling MISO transmission planning. So I had to bring this up. This is from Daniel Tate, April 5th. Uh, the Texas freeze kind of highlights the need for transmission to protect consumers and increase renewable energy. This is one of my big soapboxes to get on. The more interconnected we are, the easier it is to integrate lots of renewables. So the more geographically connected we are, the more stable kind of renewable generation becomes, and you can move it from where it's generated to where you need it. So it's kind of well known that you need a lot of transmission installed in the next 30 years in the US. And it turns out one of the utilities has been actively working against transmission projects. Right. So one of the benefits of transmission projects just right now is that you can get cheaper power brought in from somewhere else. This is a big deal. For instance, in New York City, there's not enough transmission lines, so electricity is expensive in the city, and you can't get cheaper electricity in. So people who own those generators that are running and getting high prices, they don't want to see new transmission lines come in. And so this is what I think is Entergy's motivation here. They don't want to see cheaper power coming in and might undermine their operations in areas that are kind of transmission constrained. So I was very disappointed to see this. The Public Service Commission saying Mississippi was hiring consultants, and then Entergy hired the same consultants and we're feeding them the information to give to the Michigan PSC. So this is terrible. This needs to be investigated. In my opinion, there needs to be, there's a crime here that needs to be prosecuted. So I was very disappointed to see this.
And I think there's a sort of, gets tacked onto the baker's dozen of reasons why utilities don't, act.
I mean, I definitely recommend people read this because it almost sounds like a spy novel. Like, look, they had used a covert agent. I mean, it's just like it's like a
Yeah.
spy movie. It's
Yeah.
weird.
And it goes into like what we see as a lot of the astroturfing by utility companies. So here in California, Sempra Energy, which is the owner of SoCal Gas, and I think a few others, they have created these like so-called grassroots, air quotes, grassroots organizations, and they're really they're consultants and paid actors and so forth. Literally, they do Craigslist ads to bring in actors that go to city planning meetings and so forth and say, "Oh, I don't want more clean energy. I want more gas." Um, and the thing is, and it's fine for utility companies to do this, but they're not supposed to use ratepayer funds to do it. Or if they do, they're supposed to disclose it. And so what Sempra Energy through SoCal Gas has been doing has basically been trying to screw over the customers here and use their own money. It's like, you have to pay for us to give you, worse service. It's like, so that's also being investigated. And the Arizona Public Utility Commission, that similar thing went on there um, in their fight, and that it was actually, I think, just a straight like bribery case of the utility commission.
Yeah, and in Ohio, yeah.
Ohio as well. Like
Yeah.
we can just add on more
We
states.
could
It's
add
like, oh
on.
yeah, in this state and in this state.
There's
Yeah,
a
I mean, so that they're
yeah,
like it is a, I think it just sort of goes up like perverse incentives into the system, and that's the incentives aren't aligned.
right,
And it's
right.
again sort of like going back to like the individual incentives. I think, so the utilities, it is a fact that the utilities have played an amazing and important role in our society for the last 100 and so many years. And what we need to do is now align the incentives for them to continue to operate and grow in this new grid, new society that we want.
Correct. I fully agree.
What else we
All
got?
right. Do you want to move on to this one
Oh,
here?
yeah, this is a good one.
All
So
right.
this is a Bloomberg Green article by Ben Elgin also from the Fifth, going along with net zero targets, and a lot of corporations buy carbon offsets and carbon credits, and the Nature Conservancy, and this is sort of goes primarily into the Nature Conservancy's their carbon credit program, but also talks about the Audubon Society and a few other large nonprofits, basically selling off carbon credits to forests and other sort of pristine wildlife that they own and manage, but never plan to develop. And so these carbon credits are essentially supposed to protect land. And if you have no plan of cutting down these trees, those carbon credits are meaningless. And so it's allowing these giant corporations to pollute more and pay to say that they're net zero or they're reducing their emissions
Right.
without actually reducing any emissions or adding any further emissions reductions. And this is generally a problem with carbon offsets in the carbon credit market, is that they're too inexpensive and there's just a lot of too much hogwash in there, too much BS. Um, and it's, get to real zero, not net zero. It's
Put it
like,
politely. Yeah.
yeah. So these corporations, it's like, hey, let's transition our building off of fossil fuels. Let's, what was it? It's like Microsoft developed this, video chat platform called Teams, but their salespeople took more flights than than the people of some countries. It's like, hey, let's reduce our emissions to zero, and then yes, we will need some offsets, but we need greater verification and we need greater quality offset programs.
Yeah. I mean, until these carbon offset or these carbon credits are based on sequestration, to me, they don't really mean anything. They're just an accounting gimmick, right?
Yeah.
And I don't like any of this. This is
Yeah.
why I've been a critic of that net zero, because it's just an accounting exercise. It's just not doing anything.
And a lot, like we're seeing it sort of in the finance space too, of um using like your purchases. It's like, oh, you can offset the emissions from your purchase and like plant trees. Well, a lot of the tree planting, like, so this is like conservation of existing land, and then there's tree planting. Well, if you, with a tree planting program in some areas, it was cheaper for farmers or people living near forests to cut down biodiverse forests and just plant monocrop trees. It's like, well, that's actually worse. So it's what we what we incentivize, what we reward, is really important. I think on the Audubon societies, uh, oh, here's one that, like this quote you're on here is Texaco gave this donated a huge tract of land to the Nature Conservancy, basically for their own tax write-off purposes,
Mm.
and the Nature Conservancy has just entered that plot of land, which was supposed to be conserved in perpetuity as part of this donation. They've just put it up for carbon credits, which means that they plan to, or they're stating that this is at risk of development, which then sort of breaks the covenant of the donation. So there's some, a little bit of a legal and tax discussion that needs to go on there. And the Audubon Society had one where it's this, it's like tract of bayou down in Louisiana or something like that, where all these cypress trees that have been untouched for millennia. And it's like, okay, this is pristine, untouched for, yeah, here's the photo.
Yeah, that's it.
Untouched for 1,000 years, but all of
Yeah.
a sudden we're going to cut it down unless you pay us. It's like, what? Are you holding these trees hostage?
Yeah, it's, well, just like anything, it kind of gets perverse the longer it continues, right? Just like
Yeah.
we saw on Pace, yeah.
Yeah. I'm more in favor of, it's like, okay, you want a carbon credit? It's like, well, it's, $50 a ton to do rooftop solar on a low income person's home, something like that. Cheaper if that donation goes to Grid Alternatives, which is a nonprofit, and their labor is volunteer effort. And so it's like, do that. It's economically beneficial, and it's putting more, we're avoiding emissions. A lot of these tree-based schemes don't really work.
Yeah. Yeah, I hear you. We'll have to move on.
Yeah. Oh, this is a great one. This study, this was sort of like in the good news category. So this one is a report just from 2 days ago, that from the Lawrence Berkeley Labs study that says basically we are halfway to reaching our zero carbon emission goals. Utility states, like, we're making a lot better progress than we thought. And I think this is mostly on a goal setting process, and then like starting the work. We haven't cut our emissions half as we need to. So we still got a long way to go. And I don't want to say, hey, we're there. You don't give up, or like don't need to do so much work. I still want to request everyone to do as much as they can, swap their internal combustion engine vehicle for an EV. And actually, that's a big one. So if you're waiting in 2 to 3 years, we should see dozens of new models. And if you're waiting for that time, I say lease an EV right now. If it will cover 90+% of your daily driving, lease an EV right now. And then when that lease is up, it will go into the secondary market. And so somebody who can't afford to get a brand new EV should be able to afford that one. So now you're essentially putting 2 EVs on the market, onto the roads instead of just one.
Oh yeah.
So this is I'm pushing leasing of EVs as a big accelerant right now.
Yeah, I agree. I think anybody who owns 2 cars in their family, one of them should be an EV, right? The other one you can take on long trips, and most people travel 35 miles a day, so you can
Less
use an
than,
EV for that.
yeah. And if you park, like if you drive to work and you can park and there's a 120-volt outlet there, and then you park and then plug in at a 120-volt outlet at home, that's about 110 miles a day.
Yeah.
So if you drive less than 110 miles a day, you can get by on a 120-volt outlet at both ends.
Yeah, and it's the same behavior that you do with your cell phone, right? You plug it in every day, plug it
Yeah.
in at work, same thing. Actually, okay, so coming back to this, yeah, it is a 52% reduction, but it's against a projection. I was actually reading another article on this today, that it's against the EIA's projection, which has notoriously been, how should I put it, bad. They make assumptions that like coal is going to continue growing, and the ITC will expire, every year. And they're always dead wrong. So it's kind of a 52% reduction against almost like a worst case projection, but it's still something to celebrate. Look, your total electric bill is down from projection. Coal and oil is 70% less than projected. Natural gas is 112% more than in 2005, but that's mostly because we turned off coal and we went to natural gas, which cuts your carbon emissions in half right away. So that was
coal. Yeah, I mean, coal is 70% less than projected, which is pretty amazing. And I think, I think we'll see just about most or all of the rest of the coal plants turned off by end of this decade, if not beforehand.
Well, I'd just like to see storage or wind or something put in its place, right?
For the we will. I think I think a big thing that we need to do is not turn off our nuclear plants before we can
Yeah.
replace those, if we turn them off at all. Like,
All right, we can we could have another podcast on that one.
yeah, ooh, hit a button.
Oh, that's another big issue. Yeah. I'm gonna skip ahead.
Yeah.
This one from reneweconomy.com.au. This is in Australia. Wow. Um, this was I have a couple that are a little interesting. This is from James Farnahu, April 5th. For hydrogen to dominate the low carbon world, batteries must fail. So I wanted to bring this up just to kind of clarify this a little and also kind of give a rebuttal for this, because I feel like it's a little sensationalism is basically all it is to get you to click on their site. But um, they do make a good point that kind of batteries are kind of more economic and make more sense as far as storage goes. If you're going to use hydrogen to store energy for the grid, the return, efficiencies aren't really that great. And so their position is that, battery technology is the most powerful solution of the three. They give three examples: carbon capture and storage, hydrogen, and batteries. So pretty much all of these are expensive, and they're making the argument that on a net return basis, batteries are the most efficient. Um, however, I really feel that we're not going to be able to build enough batteries to make this work if you look at kind of the resource constraints, because I see a vast amount of storage that needs to come, and I just don't see batteries filling that. So at some point, you're going to have a need for a lot of battery storage and not enough batteries, and so that'll drive the price up where hydrogen comes in. So I think we need a balance of a lot of different technologies. We'll naturally find, the market will find the right use cases for them. I don't think we should jettison hydrogen just yet. So yeah, a little bit of sensationalism here, I think, on the part of the author.
Yeah, I think hydrogen definitely has a place to play. I don't really see it in light duty vehicles. I think that will maintain lithium ion. We've definitely
Right.
seen hydrogen in already being used in like forklifts, and sort of it's all fixed within a like warehouse space, or a contained space, so it's easy to just go and refill. So the infrastructure is there. Heavy duty vehicles, I think, it works out. I think the author also says that long haul aviation, 2/3 of aviation emissions are short haul flights, and those could be done either hydrogen or straight battery electric. We're starting to see some of that. Yeah, I think there's an opportunity. I think it does have more of an uphill climb, versus there are wires everywhere, so it's easier for batteries to sort of plug in.
Yeah.
And I think we'll see a lot of different chemistries come into play, rather than just sort of the same sort of lithium
Yeah.
ion chemistry that we've seen for 30 some years.
Yeah, or flow batteries or something, right? Yeah. But I
Lots of
mean,
different.
they do make this case that the round trip, at least for electricity storage, is kind of costly and inefficient. This gentleman from RMI described it as really dumb.
Yeah,
uh,
I mean, if you're using electricity to split water into hydrogen and oxygen, which is like that's a process of electrolysis is
right,
incredibly energy intensive. So if you're doing that and then storing the hydrogen and then putting it back through a fuel cell to produce electricity,
right.
like you lose a lot in the process. But if we have excess capacity and you're using the excess capacity that's at a negative price, or effectively zero, that sort of changes the equation a bit.
Yeah, but I just think that this argument just isn't that strong for me. Like, combustion turbines aren't hugely efficient, right? They're hugely efficient against theoretical limits, but you still got a lot of heat going out the tailpipe. LNG is hugely inefficient, but we're doing that. It takes a third of the energy in the natural gas to compress it. So you lost a third right there. So just because it's inefficient doesn't mean we're not going to do it, right?
Right.
Yeah.
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 And then it's just sort of the efficiency. It's like you have to bring the cost into it and the use. And it's like, well, at some
Right.
point it makes sense. Like the efficiency level is still, it's good enough. Like it makes sense. So
Yeah, and some smart entrepreneurs will figure out what market it makes sense in, right?
yeah.
All right, so I had to bring this up. This is one of my long-standing eeks. This is from Bloomberg Green. Thank you, Bloomberg Green. Big wind turbines prove no deadlier to wildlife than small units. This is March 31st, going back a little bit, by Josh Saul. This has been one of the issues that always kind of is weird to me, that the environmentalists tend to kill these wind farm projects because they claim that birds will nest right here, on the top of a large wind turbine, and then the babies will walk out and run into the blades. And so, actually, the offshore wind project in New York, I think it's going over 10 years now, based just on environmental concerns. It's been delayed. So it's good to see at least this being studied. This is from the Journal of Applied Ecology. You can look into this. So the point they made was the bigger turbines would kill no more wildlife than a smaller one, and so there's no like unique reason to have environmental studies for these large wind projects, and that we should move forward with these. So this is good to see. I hope people take this into account when they're approving these projects. Yeah, hopefully we can get more offshore wind installed.
Yeah. Offshore and onshore. If you have just a bunch of tiny ones, then there's really no open path for the birds. But if you replace some of the smaller units and leave, if you're going to, like here in California, we've got fields of tons of tiny wind turbines that were put in 30 years ago, and you replace, you take all of them down, but you replace 1/3 of them or 1/4 of them with units that are now 5-10 times that size. Now they're more spaced out, there are more pathways, and you're producing more energy. So you can have a net decrease in the total number of bird strikes per field. So
Yeah,
it's,
I would think offshore too, you'd have less bird strikes. I don't know,
yeah,
but they
hope
don't
so.
mention that.
An important thing to keep improving upon either way.
Yeah. Okay, moving on here. This one from Forbes. That's another one of my ongoing themes. April 6th. Oh, what McKenzie contributed. That's interesting. Why are oil majors investing in offshore wind? So I'm very, very happy to be talking about this. This is from Valentina Kretschmar. Excellent German name from Wood Mackenzie. It turns out oil majors are coming into the capital allocation space for clean energy, and they're picking offshore wind. I think there's overlaps here they talk about with oil majors' experience, right? Managing large projects. They do a lot of offshore oil and gas exploration, so they're already familiar with offshore. There's a great place for them to come in. There's a great graph in here showing the amount of investment. It's in the billions of US dollars. And here are the companies that are doing it. You have Equinor, you have Shell, which is Royal Dutch Shell. You have Total, which is Spanish, I believe, right?
French.
ENI. Sorry,
Total is French.
French. Sorry, ENI is Spanish. I can't remember.
That one I don't know.
And British Petroleum has come to the party. I think they were doing it a long time ago, but they're back, and this is just great to see. Very disappointed that I don't see any U.S. oil majors on this chart. And again, I'm going to say it again at the ExxonMobil annual conference, their capital investment plan is down because they quote can't find any good investments, and I mean they're missing the boat. And so these oil majors have a future, and oil majors that are not investing in the future energy transmission are not going to have a future.
ENI is Italian. I just looked it up. Yeah, I think it makes sense that oil majors are getting in. I mean, we did see this in sort of the mid-aughts of BP rebranding themselves as Beyond Petroleum.
Right.
Yeah, $100 million marketing campaign, beautiful sunflower logo and all this stuff. And they were like, "We're not oil companies, we're energy companies." I mean, now I think they're putting real money. I mean, this goes out to 2025, so it's projected expenditures. But I think there is a difference, and they too see the writing on the wall, and so they are looking to diversify their assets. These installations make money, so they're in the process of making money and delivering energy. So I think it makes sense. And also from a jobs perspective, a lot of the skills and experience are very transferable from offshore oil to offshore wind, and also onshore oil and gas to geothermal. So there's a lot of overlap, and I think as we transition further, a lot of these workers will see good jobs in the new energy economy.
Yeah, I mean, I could even complain that these numbers are low. I mean, they have tens to hundreds of billions of dollars in capital they can deploy. So I'd really like to see that deployed in
Yeah.
clean energy. Awesome. Okay. Oh, and I have one more thing here. I have your website up here, joinatmos.com. So if people want to check that out, this is something that you can do, with Cynthia, we talked about energy efficiency in your home. If you own your home, that's something you can do right now. Like you said, changing to electrification is something you can do today to make a real impact. So this is another thing you can do today to make a real impact. Yeah. Thank you, Ravi. Thanks for coming on.
Lucas, thank you so much. This was a lot of fun. And yeah, I'm open. It's just Ravi at Join Atmos. I mean, my name combination is unique in the world. So if you Google me, Ravi Mikkelsen, you will find exactly me. No other name likenesses.
Yeah, I was expecting a little different looking person when you got to meet Ravi. I'm like, oh, yeah. Okay.
Ravi is a Sanskrit name. I was born in India and named by a monk there, and Ravi means the sun. So I always tell people that I was destined to get into clean energy.
Well, there you go. Yeah.
And Mikkelsen is a Danish name. My paternal grandfather was adopted by a Danish family. By blood, I'm Croatian, Irish, German, Scottish, a little bit of Swedish in there. So
super cool. All right. Yeah. Thanks so much, Ravi.
Lucas, thank you so much.
Yeah, this has been another awesome episode of Pirates of Clean Tech, and we'll see you next week. Arr! Arr!